Hello, fellow foodies, and welcome back. This is Dr. Cassandra Quave, and you're listening to Foodie Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious. This week on the show, we have an amazing guest. I'm so excited to have Jennifer Grayson on the show. She is an award winning journalist and the author of Unlatched: The Evolution of Breastfeeding and the Making of a Controversy, which won the Society of Environmental Journalists Rachel Carson Environment Book Award and a Nautilus Book Award. She is also the author of a brand new book called A Call to Farms, which I'm really excited to dive into, that covers all of these interesting aspects of regenerative agriculture. Jennifer has a mix of incisive investigative reporting and a captivating personal writing with style that's been praised by luminaries, including the environmentalist Paul Hawken, food activist Marianne Nestle, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Michael Moss, who we've also had on the show before, and scientist David Montgomery. She's been featured on more than 3 dozen media outlets, including MSNBC, NPR, and WGN-TV. She's written for the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, USA Today, and the Huffington Post, where she wrote the long-running Innovation Earth and Eco Etiquette columns. Jennifer's new book, A Call to Farms: Reconnecting to Nature, Food, and Community in a Modern World, for which she also undertook a regenerative farmer training program at the height of COVID-19 pandemic, was published by W. Norton in July. This book calls my name, Jennifer. I'm so excited to talk about it and to share a little bit of it with our audience. Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. As you know, I'm such a fan of the Plant Hunter. So it's
Oh,
great
great.
talking to you.
We can book fangirl today. So I want to just dive right in. So take us back to middle of the pandemic. I think you did what so many of us probably fantasize about doing, about getting out of the house and getting back into nature. What can you share about that time?
Yeah, I actually still can't believe that we actually did what we did. My husband and I, when we tell the story, because we're back in Los Angeles now, spoiler alert. But in the middle of the pandemic, we were 6 months into lockdown in Los Angeles. This had come on, the heels of me spending probably 8 years, close to a decade, fantasizing about a different kind of life, not in the
Yeah.
car and in front of the screen all the time. Um, and after 6 months, and we were paying, I don't know, 70% of our income on rent to be in a good public school district in LA
Mhm.
and in here. And
I hear you. Yeah.
yeah, we had one of the early cases of COVID before the vaccine, which was pretty terrifying. And then we said, what are we doing? And we put all of our stuff in a U-Haul and we sold most of our stuff and we moved to Bend, Oregon, where shortly after I stumbled into this regenerative farmer training program. And for at least a year, we began this new life.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's start with the definition of regenerative farming. I know we've talked about it a bit on other episodes, but in case we have any new listeners that aren't as familiar with it, can you define it for us? What does that even mean?
Sure. So the really easy way to that I think about it is a new but actually ancestral old way of farming that restores biodiversity, restores the soil, works in concert with nature instead of against it, is basically the opposite of what we have in this country and much of the world now, which is industrial agriculture on a large scale that has
Mhm.
devastated our environment. Um, a lot of people are talking about regenerative agriculture as a way to possibly even reverse climate change because of its ability to capture carbon in the soil. That's really exciting. Um, but really, for the purposes of a call to farms, because the fascinating thing is everyone has a different way of approaching regenerative agriculture, and as many cultures as there have been on Earth and ways to sustainably grow food or harvest food in that environment, there are ways to approach regenerative agriculture.
Amazing. So walk us through this process. You're in Bend, Oregon, and you see this training program. What was this program like? And is this a common thing, or like, are there a lot of these programs across the country that people can learn about, or is this kind of a rare situation?
It is a rare situation, and I didn't really realize that at the time. But as I began doing the research for this book, I realized how unique this program is. It's called Rogue Farm Corps. I found out about it because I had volunteered for a gleaning day at a farm through just like a local co-op grocery store called Central
Mhm.
Oregon Bookstore that I loved, and I was working alongside uh, this young woman who had been working at this farm in this internship in this Rogue Farm Corps training program for the entire farming season. And she was going on and on about the food that they ate from the farm and how much she loved being outside and how she never felt so wonderful in her whole life. And I was just like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to sign up for this. My kids, we had been homeschooling them. School wasn't back in session yet. They were old enough that my husband was working from home and we made it work. Um, but so anyway, so Rogue Farm Corps has really made it this mission. It's a nonprofit organization to train the next generation of Oregon sustainable farmers and ranchers. And they place interns at these small farms all around the state. And, there are other small programs like that across the country, but most of them are not on this scale. And
Mm.
and a lot of them, at least things are changing, but a lot of times it comes at a great expense to the person enrolling in the program, but Rogue Farm Corps actually provides a stipend. And
Oh,
so,
nice.
yeah, and their mission is to really make it as appeal to as diverse a population as possible. And so to bring people into farming who aren't traditionally, you know, the demographics of most American farmers, which is 98% white. Actually, there are more women farmers than there used to be. Uh, but the average age of an American farmer is, I think, 59 years old.
Wow. It's a dying
So
art, it sounds like. Yeah.
yeah.
Used to bring it back.
Yeah, yeah. So programs like Rogue Farm Corps are incredible, and more of them, I think, as a result of what that organization is doing, are taking off.
That's great. So when you're interning, I mean, did this involve like working out in the fields? What did you do during this internship?
So I was a summer intern. There were interns who had been hired earlier or who had been brought on earlier in the season in March. I came on, I know I'm going to get the dates wrong, probably, I think the end of May. And I did not work the full-time interns lived on this farm's property. The name of the farm is Mahonia Gardens. It's a market garden. And I lived in nearby Bend. So I was there 3 full days a week and 1 half day a week. And a full day at that farm is unusual because they actually try to keep sensible hours so that they can actually have a
Mhm.
real family life, which is unusual in farming. I mean, most farmers are working from sunup until far past sundown.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there every day. I was harvesting and planting and washing produce and, stocking the stand, which is this amazing, local stand in front of their house where they sell local produce to the community. And I was doing everything that a regular farming intern would do. And
Amazing.
also trying to take notes with my tape recorder, not successful.
So,
And then
so,
asking them questions.
so you're coming to at this. I was about to say you're coming at this as an investigative reporter. I'm sure you had some questions in mind as you're going through this experience. How did you come to the idea for the book? Like, was this just kind of something natural that came out of the experience?
Um, so I actually went into the internship already having written the book proposal.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
yeah, so both really happened at the same time. I found out about Rogue Farm Corps and the internship probably, I think it was the fall of 2020. Um, it didn't start until spring of 2021. So between that time, because I had met Benji and Karis at Mahonia Gardens, and I was just in awe of the intention with which they were creating this regenerative farm and this lifestyle. I started reading about more farmers like them. And I realized that there was an entire generation of people who were already pursuing regenerative farming, not for my selfish reason, to run away and create a homestead in the woods, and have my kids run around in nature.
I don't think that's selfish. I think that's the most generous thing you can do for your family. That's great.
Thank you so much. But these farmers really had so far surpassed even the ideals that I had thought were possible. I mean, they were creating these farms to feed their local communities and for cultural reclamation and uh, to channel that. A lot of them had, master's degrees in sustainability and then decided
Wow.
I'm going to put that into action and work on a farm. And I was so in awe of all of these young people I had come across that I decided this would be an incredible book, and then if I was lucky enough to get the internship, that would be my first sample chapter.
Amazing. That's
Yeah.
great. So in the book, you write about soil health. I mean, soil is a living, not a creature, but a coalition of creatures, really. The soil microbiome is such a important aspect of regenerative agriculture and maintaining that soil microbiome. What did you learn about maintaining soil health and what that means for the overall health of the food grown at the farm?
Right. Well, I think before I even talk about what I learned about soil health, I think I learned so much, and I already had, based on my research, writing about environmental issues for a long time, about the state of disease of our soil. And
Yeah.
so, can we start there?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we don't often think about the dirt. Maybe. I don't know. It's even though it's so incredibly important to our food system, it's not something I think a lot of people spend a lot of time pondering. So yeah, let's talk about the state of our dirt. Of our soil.
No, that's right. Or they think it's like yucky. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember shopping at Whole Foods long before we ever went to Oregon, and because I'm kind of obsessive and now about using plastic, I had put, whenever I got produce, I would put it directly in my cart or in my
Mhm.
cloth bag. And someone came up to me and they were like, "Ugh, there's dirt all over that. Why would you eat that? Like, you have to put it in a nice plastic bag." And I was like, "No." So there's this perception that it's not even good for us. Um, when in fact, all of the nutrition that is in our food is as a result of the microbial life in the soil. And so, industrial agriculture, we have essentially sterilized all the life and this entire world that has been in there. We have spent a century and a half erasing entire ecosystems above the ground that fed what was below the ground for corn and soy.
Mhm.
We've eroded the soil to the point that a third of the soil on Earth is degraded
Wow.
or literally eroded. I mean, literally no life left in that soil. Um, and so a lot of people talk about regenerative agriculture as this antidote to climate change, which is important. But to me, the soil is everything because if we've stripped away, if we sterilized all the life that was in there, you can talk, I'm sure, far more eloquently than I can about this because this is, your science. We don't even understand fully how what we've erased in the soil has impacted our health. I mean, much in the same way that when I was working on Unlatched and researching breast milk is a living human tissue,
Yeah.
not just the food. And there's microbial life there too. And it primed the baby's microbiome, and we've completely swapped that out for a sterile alternatives without thinking about the implications. So anyway, all that being said, uh, to restore and to restore that health of the soil, I think a lot of the farmers I met with are really focused on what they can do. And so they're doing things like, you know, not tilling and not digging in the soil and
Mhm.
not disturbing those communities to even begin with. Um, and planting tons of perennial crops that keep their roots in the soil and so that the life stays there. And they're doing incredible things with all different kinds of mulch and cover crops, and it's fascinating. They all have amazing approaches. And really, you think about farmers and you think about outdoorsy people doing physical work, but a lot of the farmers I met are like citizen scientists, really
Yeah.
experimenting how they can improve the health of the soil. And the result is the most delicious food I ever tasted.
Well, and it's amazing when when you're spending that much time outdoors and you're watching things change in your farm. That is science, right? I think we forget that we all have a bit of a scientist in us, and it's all about the power of observation and seeing what interventions yield what outputs, like with your crops or the health of your livestock. So you're absolutely right. I mean, they are doing science as in this way. When we think about maybe we should go back to this idea of soil disruption and tilling. I've heard in many cases now. I know all regenerative ag is not the same, but this idea of leaving kind of the roots intact in the soil seems to be a pretty common theme across regenerative ag. Does that cause any difficulties when it comes time to, to plant the next season of crops, or what are the logistics?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the farmers that they met with probably could speak better to that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think about Osawaga Farm, um, which was the one farm that was adamantly no-till. I mean, they made that their
Hmm.
whole focus, and from what I could tell, and they just planted right on top of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it builds up more biomass each year, and as that breaks down, it's kind of like natural composting in a way, I
But
guess.
yeah, no, it is. It is like
Mhm.
natural
Mhm.
compost. And they also had all sorts of fascinating composts they were working on separately that were almost
Mhm.
acted like inoculants, almost like the way you would take
Nice.
a probiotic that they would just
Mhm.
sprinkle on top of the soil that really
Oh,
improved
cool.
the life. Yeah. Um, but I think many of the farmers who I met, there's this pressure, I think, when you're a sustainable farmer or an organic farmer, if you're lucky enough to be a certified organic farmer, to adhere to some kind of dogma that like
Mm.
you have to leave all plants in the soil and you can never use any kind of intervention. And really, when you look at what most of these small farmers are doing, even if they have to occasionally compromise compared to the scale of what 99% of agriculture is in this country, which is growing not real food on a massive scale with industrial chemicals like glyphosate and industrial fertilizers, there's no comparison. So sorry, that was a little.
Yeah. No, no, it's perfect. I mean, it's not a simple thing to answer. It's a complex issue, and I think you're right. Like there's a sliding scale of what it means to be sustainable, and you brought up a good point about being lucky enough to be certified organic. What did you learn about certification processes? Like, or did you touch on that at all with your research, and how that kind of influences what people adopt?
Yeah. Well, I knew about this for a while just from shopping at the farmers market in Los Angeles and talking to
Mhm.
farmers because it costs money to become certified organic. I think there was a recent rule passed that now there's going to be a subsidy that farmers can apply for so that they don't have to pay the full organic certification cost, which is, I don't know, it's, several $1,000s.
Yeah.
A sizable expense when you're a small
Mhm.
farmer, and especially a lot of these farmers growing on an acre, half an acre.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Land access is one of the biggest issues for young and new farmers, and that's a lot of money, to be able to grow to be certified organic, and so I know already that, a lot of times when people go to the farmer's market, they'll go to a stand and they'll say, "Oh, are you certified organic?" And the farmer will say, "No, we're not, but we use organic growing practices," and the customer will walk away. And when you
Yeah.
talk one-on-one with them, they tell you the story of how the farming methods they use and that they can't afford the expense. So it's a real obstacle, and I think
I've
it's been
also heard this
incredible.
for livestock because I was, I've my father leaving these cattle. I was like, well, I would like to rear these cattle organically and get them organic, but it does not seem like such an easy process, especially for small scale. Um, and I think I think that's an issue both for, plant agriculture, but also livestock ag. Yeah. There's
Yeah,
some barriers there. Yeah.
there's some real barriers, and honestly, I think after doing the research for this book and talking to so many farmers, I think they are intentional. You're talking about, oh, the U.S. government giving a subsidy so they can subsidize half the cost of like $7,000 so that someone could be certified organic, and organic feed is like 1% of all seed grown in this country to begin with. And meanwhile, we're handing out $15 billion worth of subsidies every year to grow not even food that's used for or food stuffs and
Yeah.
biofuels. And so it is an
The two dirtiest words, farm bill.
and I didn't even want to touch it because look, I'm from outside this world. I am not a sustainable agriculture expert. I do not have a degree in agriculture. I am a citizen gravely concerned about the state of our food system. who came to these issues from the outside. And when you talk to people who are in that world, they're like, well, we can tweak the farm bill here and there, and maybe we can get this funding for some farmers of color and organic certification. And I think the whole
It's such a
simplicity,
tiny sliver of the whole piece.
yeah, it is. And
Yeah.
the thing,
Maybe it's
when you
work.
start to
Yeah.
realize what's going on, it's outrage.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I could go into a whole farm bill. I like, I know we could have a lot to speak about this. I'll just say to the listeners, this is something to educate yourself about. It's not wholly transparent, which is part of the problem, but there are real barriers to growing healthier food. And there are massive incentives that go toward lobbyist supported, big ag, that you're not going to see those types of incentives go to small farmers that, can't even afford to get organic certified because it's really the odds are stacked against them under the system. But I think what's exciting about starting with regenerative ag, because regenerative ag is very much, and I would say in some ways goes not just parallel to organic, but almost goes a step forward because you can have organic agriculture that's not actually regenerative, right? But not
Correct.
vice versa. So I think that's an exciting aspect of it. And it's really about this, you know, concept of treating the soil as this living organism that's critical to the underlying health of your farm, of your food, and thus health to us who consume the products of that system. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not just small farmers. I mean, you look at some of the conventional farmers like Gabe Brown, who I don't know if you've had on the show, but would be an incredible
No.
guest,
Yeah.
from the world of conventional Midwest farming, who is saying we can't keep doing this to our soil, and looking at how even large agriculture can adopt some of these practices. And
Hmm.
there's a regenerative grazer in the book named Ariel Greenwood, and they work within the commodity cattle market to try to
Yeah.
improve grazing practices because there's like no good land left. And so they have to actually do what they can to make it better within the existing system. Um, so yeah, I think there's a lot of hope, and I also think, we have to think about what's at stake too, because our health as a nation is catastrophic. 1 in 2
Yeah.
people will have cancer, 1 in 2, I think men it is, 1 in 3 women in their lifetime. Autoimmune disease is epidemic. Obesity, diabetes, a third of Americans are going to have diabetes by the year 2050.
Ah,
So I think it can't just be the small farmers. It has to be
No, we
everyone.
definitely need these at the larger scale. I mean, I think for anyone, I mean, I have the incredible privilege of the opportunity to travel a lot for my job. And I think one of the biggest things that I know in global travel is that food is different in other places. I can go, for example, to places like Northern Europe, Sweden, and have a strawberry that actually tastes what strawberries are supposed to taste like, rich and delicious and flavorful. Or in the Balkans and having bilberry juice, or, in Italy and having a tomato that actually tastes like a tomato. And I think we've become so accustomed to this. Even if we're trying to eat a whole food diet, I could go into my local grocery store, to my local Publix or Kroger that we have here in Georgia, and get huge, beautiful red strawberries that look like something out of a photo book that have zero flavor and probably very little health value because, flavor is chemistry. And the chemistry is not there. I mean, our mouths or our taste buds are telling us what this is and what this is not. Mm. And I think what an opportunity you had to like have that experience of having that connection to the land, because I think that's something that so many people will never have that opportunity to have in their entire lifetime because we've become so very separate from it. So I don't know if you have other things from the other experiences from the book that you feel are really were really meaningful to you? Like, were there any moments where you're like, wow, this really made me rethink our food system when you were doing this work?
Yeah. Oh, I had so many moments like that, but just hearing you talk about, food in other countries and I love that part of the plant hunter so much when you're in Italy and you're like learning to cook for the first time and when you taste what food tastes like in other places where people actually value the food, it's not for health. It's for the pleasure of the food itself and how
It's the
wonderful.
pleasure. Food pleasure should be at the top of our
Yeah.
priorities.
I
Yes.
mean, even though we love farmers markets, but everyone here is like, you go to the store Erewhon. Have you heard about it?
No, not yet. No.
Oh, okay. It's like the health store. It's like it caters to every diet that you could possibly imagine. So if you're like vegan, gluten free, paleo, there's a hot bar and everyone looks gorgeous and everyone's drinking smoothies that are $20. And it's like, I would rather be in Italy eating like something that someone's grandmother made. It's
Yeah.
you're not eating it for pleasure. You've forgotten what food is for, which is not just to feed ourselves. It's to be part of our experience here on Earth as humans and to connect with each other. So I was just thinking when you're talking about the strawberries, this was a long before I set out to write this book, but it ended up being a chapter in this book because it was so
Mhm.
transformative, which was when I spent my family and I spent 3 months in the agrihood of Serenbe, which is
Oh,
Are you
yes.
Georgia.
Yes, I've been to Serenbe here. It's just outside
You
of Atlanta near the airport. Yes, my best friend and I did a girls' weekend away. We got the romantic package because it was the cheapest. So we got massages. We got amazing food. It's a really lovely place to visit.
Where is it? Where did you stay?
At the end, yeah,
At the inn.
yeah,
Okay, okay. Um,
yeah.
it's very, it's very posh and they definitely have that side of it. But when you're living there, there
Oh
are
yeah.
trails like your kids get to their friends' houses by trail in the woods. And and I would go for these long walks. My poor husband was working. He was on set. That's why he was shooting something in Atlanta. And so I was watching the kids, but they were in camp a little. And I was very, very lucky to have the luxury of like pondering my next book idea while foraging blackberries. And
There you go.
because they plant blueberries intentionally as landscaping because they're really into edible
Mhm.
landscaping there, which is wonderful. But there's also, it's we were there in the summer and it's the South in the summer and there's all these incredible things growing and the taste of those like tiny, tiny little blackberries that have so much, they're sour, but they're strangely addictive. And
Yes.
my kids we would eat as many as we could find. And even to this day, they're still like, they'll see one of those blackberries from Trader Joe's that's bred for maximum sugar explosion, and they're like,
Yeah.
this isn't
Doesn't
food."
taste right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Some
and
of my
so
best childhood memories are eating like wild blackberries. I can so identify with this, what you guys did.
oh, yeah, that's true. Me too. When I was growing up in Connecticut, we had just a day camp, not like a fancy summer camp, and they would take us to go forage raspberries in the summer.
Amazing.
Yeah.
These are the things that stick with you. It's those experiences and that memory of that food stuck with you. So now when you taste those other blackberries from the supermarket, it's just not the same.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really I think it's so important to say too that it shouldn't be a privilege thing. You know, this is like you talk to anyone who grew up in a rural area several decades ago and they were going with their grandparents to get chestnuts and greens and like
Mhm.
you don't have to have well now you do because you have to have the luxury of time to be able to do these things.
Yes.
But really food should be the great equalizer. And it's this knowledge that we've lost. And so that was one of the most powerful things about writing A Call to Farms was meeting people from all different cultures who were reconnecting with this knowledge. And a lot of times from, like the cool 90-year-old great grandmas in their neighborhood. And yeah, it
Yeah.
it's emotional. It has to
Well,
be.
it's just
Otherwise, why would you do it? Why would you care
yeah.
about working on a farm or writing about food or, you know, going to the Amazon to research all these incredible plants? Like,
Yeah. It is emotional. It's all about that connection, I think. more than anything. And it's about reclamation of traditional knowledge because that's what we're really talking about. And ethnobotany, we think a lot about this. Ethnobotanists study the science of survival. And I like to pose this question to my students. If we were to go into a forest here in Georgia or even in their home state, like how many could actually survive for more than a week, right? Be able to procure food, how, create shelter, like, know what things are going to poison you versus, what things to heal your wounds. And I think that for me, that loss of knowledge is, I think, one of the greatest tragedies of our generation because it wasn't that long ago. I mean, my grandmother definitely knew how to forage wild food. She knew how to kill and, you know, prepare a chicken for dinner. I mean, well, know how to go and kill a chicken and pluck it and get it ready for dinner. Like that. I feel like that's something I should know, though. It's, um, there's just these little things that just seem like they were such common sense, but then I think really it was at some point, 1950s, those types of activities were associated with poverty. And you see this happen a lot too in other cultures where you have what are called quote unquote famine foods. Wild greens tend to fall in that category. But then they come into trend, they become popular again. And so what was grandma's knowledge that started to disappear may show up in unique restaurants. And it's, oh, well, now everyone wants this rare thing that no one knows how to collect any longer. And feel like we go through these cycles. My concern is what happens when we lose that chain of knowledge, right?
Yes. And that is really the concern that drives me too. And I think, we've gone through these little cycles within the past maybe 100 years or so, but I don't think, I think what we're facing now is unprecedented, really, in human history, in the co opting of all this knowledge or the replacement by industrial life, by technology. And we're on the precipice of it being a race. And scary thing is, it really only takes a generation.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember it was just a tiny thing I wrote about in Unlatched, but it's the story that has stayed with me forever. There was this, um, I believe it was the turn of the last century. There was this tiny little town on the, um, what was then like the border of Norway and Sweden. It wasn't quite in one of the countries, and for whatever reason, no one knew. People there had stopped breastfeeding, and so whenever anyone went out to hunt, they had created these like horns where they would put animal milk in skins and leave these babies propped up with these makeshift bottles, with goat milk or whatever, like it was. And this went on for like a generation until these public health workers stumbled upon this little town. And the infant mortality rate there was like 40% because these children had none of nothing that protected them from microbes that would kill them. All the benefits of breastfeeding that has evolved throughout thousands of years of human history. Anyway, and so they reintroduced breastfeeding, and there was like no more infant deaths. And so
Wow.
what's always fun for me is just how it just takes one generation to think that the way you have done things has always been that way. And I see that now with my kids, like at least here in Los Angeles, people are so busy. It's very rare for people to cook dinner anymore or cook real food. Everyone's eating takeout and sometimes
Yeah.
or fast food, and I don't know where we go from here. Um,
Yeah, I think it is strange. It's like I've had my kids have told us like, well, my friends they don't eat dinner with their parents. I've heard this from from college students too. That I've brought in the field. I remember one time we were in Florida collecting plants and I had them on a rotation, like everybody cooks. I had one student from New York, so graded from the cities. She's like, well, I don't know how to cook anything. It's like, well, here, cut these tomatoes. I don't know how to cut a tomato. Like, what? What do you mean you don't know how to cut a tomato? Like, so, I was like, wow, we need to do something different either at home or in our schools or in our community programs that bring these things back. And because it is so easily lost. But at the same time, I think I also want to turn back to the opportunities that there
yeah,
are. You will again, I think we've seen this also, when you had the economic crisis that happened in Greece, so many young people from the city, from Athens, went back to their ancestral lands and the countryside and tried to reclaim this culture of farming. And I want to know, like, what's your take on the American situation? What hope do we have for any of our listeners here that may be thinking about, like, maybe I could farm. Maybe I'm a city kid that doesn't know how to cut a tomato, but you know what? I want to do something better for this world for myself. How can they get started?
Yeah. Thanks for asking and for taking me away from my doom and gloom. Yeah, so that was the incredible thing about the pandemic. And one led me to this book because it was like, obviously it was horrifying for so many people. But it was this great pause. And all of a sudden, you had a lot of people reconsidering their lives. And that's still ongoing. We're in the middle of the great resignation, and people are dissatisfied. And like that wonderful episode you had about climate anxiety with Britt Ray, who talked about this need that we want to do something. And so there is this amazing opportunity. So it was that moment in time combined with the fact that nearly half of all farmland in America is changing hands in the next 10 years because American farmers are aging out. And so we have this 10-year opportunity for change. We could change it. And and there is so much hope. I mean, you look at other countries like you were talking about, and I think I wrote down the statistic. It's small growers globally produce a third of the world's food on 5 acres or less.
Wow. So it
And so
doesn't take investment in hundreds of acres because that's something that may be very, I mean, realistically unattainable as you're starting out. Land's not cheap,
yeah.
but 5 acres in farmland, that might be possible for a lot of people.
It is even an acre. I mean, most of the farms I interviewed, a lot of them were an acre. I worked on an acre. You can grow. Mahonia Gardens grew more than 40 different varieties of vegetables on 1 acre. So there's so much opportunity, and especially the more people who transform these communities. You got a lot of small farmers like in Bend or Sisters, Oregon, where I was, and all of a sudden you have a local food system, and it's really exciting. And listen, it's not an easy path. You do not go into small farming, small regenerative farming to uh so that you can, drive the newest Tesla around. Like because it's an embodied way uh to really affect incredible change in a time we need it. And so there is so much hope. And I think, the other amazing statistic I was looking over my notes, and 90% of Americans could be fed with food grown within 100 miles. We could do it.
Wow.
It's possible. And so if we could get more farmer training programs like Rogue Farm Corps, there was an incredible farm in the book in Connecticut, Ambler Farm. That's actually in the town where I went to high school. And they have a training program for people starting in grade school. And so these kids
Wow.
are mentored from the time, they're like grade schoolers all the way through high school. And a lot of them are going into sustainable agriculture now. And so seeking out these programs, getting involved, even if you don't want to be an on the ground farmer, there's so many exciting ways to get involved in local agriculture. One of them being food hubs, which are the way that all of the local food is actually being aggregated so it could be sold at places like Costco or Walmart. And we could really transform our food system.
Amazing. Well, I think too, if you don't want to pursue this as a career or you don't see yourself farming, I think there are also a lot of community organizations that will help you just get your hands in the soil, whether it is in community gardens or here in Atlanta, for example, we have an organization, a nonprofit called Concrete Jungle. You mentioned gleaning early in the episode. And they organize groups who go out and glean. And gleaning, by the way, is just basically picking after the main industrial pick has been done. And whatever remains, you pick that. They do gleaning. They collect wild pears and things and make ciders and all kinds of fun things that you can do as a community. I think that also helps foster this sense of belonging and connection to your community, which is also good for your health, in addition to that physical activity outdoors.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Just feeling that connection to other people, um, feeling just, I guess, what's possible again. And also, it's important because this is a time of a lot of upheaval. Like, we've got
Yeah.
in coming up. There are hurricanes displacing people, and it's we are seeing now the effects of all of the things that everyone's been terrified of. And I think having these small farmers, having these communities, local food, it's only going to make us more resilient. And it's an opportunity to prepare now. You know,
Yeah.
so the next time, if there is another pandemic, or we're not all scrambling for toilet paper and canned whipped cream at Trader Joe's, like it's a way to feel empowered. And food prices are high. And listen, like we are very blessed that we're doing okay. But I'm still growing arugula in a little
Hmm.
pot on my side yard because it's expensive now at the market, and it's really easy to grow on your own. And so just those little things that help offset your food costs.
Yeah. I wanted to get some basil the other day at the store, at just the regular grocery store for like 2.89 for a little measly sprig of basil. I was like, "Are you kidding? This is something I should, you know, I should have just kept alive in my kitchen." The windowsill garden. I'm like, "Oh, this is what I get for not keeping my herbs alive." It's
Are botanists not good gardeners, or are you actually a living garden?
I think I do okay. I'm a neglectful gardener. That's my challenge because I'm away and traveling so much. So
Yeah.
um that's yeah. I have to be more present. But I do love gardening, especially herbs. So yeah, it's something again, helps you reclaim that connection um to everything.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Um so let's see. Last as we're wrapping up. I guess one last question is because I want to come back to your connection between the soil microbiome and the human microbiome because you learned a lot. You really shared a lot in your first book about the value of the microbiome of breast milk of this living tissue. Is there a connection between the two of the soil? I mean, are there common themes between what we produce versus what the soil produces? Or as a living I'm just wondering if there's like a last bit to illustrate those connections.
Yeah, I mean, quite simply, we are what we eat. So when you go to other countries that are foraging and growing in uncontaminated soil, or soil that hasn't been doused with industrial pesticides, their microbial health is considering, it's far more diverse than most Americans. I mean, there's a lot of research coming out now about the link between autoimmune diseases and microbiome dysfunction, and the fact that we have literally just erased all the trillions of bacteria from our gut. And so, yeah, there's a real connections. Um, and I think, I would love to see more science backing it up, because unfortunately, I think nothing really gets done in this country, especially, I can my gut, my most common sense would tell you that if you increase the use of glyphosate 2,000% over 2 decades, and erase all microbial health in the soil, that we probably will not have diverse microbial communities in our gut, and possibly that could have a connection to the rise in disease. But to see the actual science backing that up,
Yeah,
um,
and it's
maybe
complex because everyone eats different things, and so it's I think what makes these studies on food so challenging is it's not like a study on a pharmaceutical drug where you only have one chemical entity. In a single carrot, you have thousands of chemical entities. Now, if you have a carrot in a salad, you have thousands of chemical entities for each of those ingredients. And it's like, and you're absolutely right, how that's grown and what the chemical makeup is. We need more science to study that. I'm optimistic because I think there are initiatives out there that are starting to dive deeper into this concept of like what makes up our food and how does that impact our health. We've had some exciting episodes, updates from the Periodic Table of Food initiative that cover this topic. Um, I think we're going to start learning more. So lots to stay tuned for.
yeah, for sure. And when you look even at what's being discovered with the tiny areas of research, it's the implications are astounding. Like this one researcher, Lars Boda at UC San Diego, who studies oligosaccharides in breast
Mm.
milk, which are these complex sugars that aren't digested by people. They can prime the microbiome and they act as these like anti-adhesive, antimicrobial molecules. And just that one tiny, and there's like 150 different, there's a pattern of oligosaccharides that every mother has that's unique to her child.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so you're talking about one sugar molecule that can affect an entire microbiome. And so but then when you think about, you know, one scientist studying one particular bacteria in one area of soil and the implications for the health of the food. And yeah, it'll be really fascinating to see. I hope you have some of those guests on your show.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking of we had an episode a couple of years ago with Bruce German, who does studies on the breast milk, and yeah, and he explained that, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is something that's feeding the microbiome of the infant rather than the infant directly, and that was just amazing. Mm. So tune into that one, foodies. That was I think it was called The Science of Breast Milk, or an episode we had a couple of years ago. It's really, really good.
Oh, listen, fascinating.
Yeah. So where can we send folks to get your amazing book, A Call to Farms? Where can they go? And do you have a website you can share with us?
Thank you. JenniferGrayson.com. And it is sold wonderfully. It's sold in a lot of local bookstores. So hopefully your local bookstore, but it is, of course, on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all the major retailers. And I'm also on Instagram, Jennifer Grayson 1.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Jennifer. It was great speaking with you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. You've been listening to Foodie Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious, recorded for you today on Squadcast. I want to thank our producers, to Rob Cohen and Christine Roth, for putting on a great show. And thanks to you, our listeners, for tuning in each week. If you want to find this or our other episodes, you can head over to our website at foodiepharmacology.com, or go over to our Teach Ethnobotany channel on YouTube, where you can find the video version of this and our other episodes. Thanks so much for listening. Stay healthy out there, and I'll see you next time.